Welcome to Capital Report After Hours, where we kind of kick around the issues of the day in a more casual setting. Now, joining us is my friend George Colli, who is back on the, well, not back, but he's back in Connecticut on the News 8 team. Congratulations to George.
Welcome back.
DuPont Award winner, whatever the heck that means. But
I remember,
big deal. Tom, I remember George calling me years ago and saying that I got this story for you, and it involves concrete and foundations, and trust me, it's going to be big. And at that point, it turns out right now, here we are in 2017, it is big. There's more of the story. The legislature gave the budget some money. We'll touch on all that. I think this won't be the last time we'll hear you reporting on this important issue.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, the Crumbling Foundation story. I think you were one of my first calls. And at that time, this was in summer of 2015, we knew of 24 homes that had this issue in the early 2000s. I happened to track down those homeowners. They all had the same story. Each and every one of them would cry on the phone as soon as you called them. They did not want to talk about it. It was like talking about a cancer in the family. And we did the first story when we did it, and we didn't know how big it was going to be, but we said, if this is real, if there's a lot of these, this is unlike anything I've ever seen. I have a real estate background. I mean, a foundation crumbling, insurance doesn't cover it. It costs $200,000 because the only way to fix it is by jacking your house up and ripping everything out. It sounded insane. Well, we did that first story. We got 100 emails in 24 hours of people saying, I have this problem. In local news or politics or anything, if you get 5 emails, you're like, oh, we're be onto something here. This may be a story. 100 emails.
Well, George, before we, I think the most important thing that I want people who watch this segment to understand is that we spoke about this. This problem is going to go on for decades. This is not just something they're going to fix and it's going to go away. Decades, we're talking decades and decades of this being a problem with more and more homes. And now I think we've even seen it going into the infrastructure, bridges and highways.
Schools.
Give us a measure of the enormity of this issue for Eastern Connecticut.
Well, you're looking at it, the governor has estimated a number of 34,000 homes that could possibly have this. You're hearing that number. That number's not accurate. The governor would tell you what 34,000 homes is the number of homes within a 15 or 20 mile radius of Stafford Springs, where the concrete company was, that got permits to put foundations in the ground between 1983 and like 2002 or 2003. And so that's what you're starting at. Potentially that could be the highest number. We figure I've been in hundreds of these homes. You're probably looking at homes that are actually cracking right now, somewhere in maybe the 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 range. That also includes condo units, so it may be one foundation with 8 units on it. The fear is that you had the biggest real estate boom in history, starting in 2003, going until 2008, 2009. Homes in Tolland and Coventry, I mean, they had 20% of the homes in the whole towns were built at that time. It takes 15 to 20 years for the first crack to come. This concrete company that is in question, that so far all the reported issues are coming from this concrete company or from concrete delivered from this company, they were putting concrete in the ground in residential projects, in Yukon projects. We got them on video pouring at Yukon up until the end of 2015. So 15 to 20 years from now, homes that were built in 2013, 2014, 2015 could possibly be cracking. Now, we don't know the science of this yet. We think it's this mineral that's in the rock in the aggregate.
Pyrrhotite. And
that the pyrrhotite that over time air and water get into it, causes that iron sulfide mineral to swell and expand. That leads to the cracking and it actually pushes the house up off the foundation. We were in a house last night that has cracks I was putting my hand in, 1,000 of them, that wide. It looks like it's going to crumble down. It's actually getting pushed up. So if you have lolly columns supporting this house, there's a 4-inch gap between the lolly column and the house 2 years after the lolly column.
So can people live in these houses? I mean, should people worry?
Yes, but we don't know. The thing is, it keeps getting worse. So you can't, from all the science, and there's only one other place in North America where this problem exists, and that's outside of Quebec in Canada. The science is that it keeps getting worse. So you can't just like fill the cracks and put on some skim coat and say we're going to be fine. More cracks will come.
And now we have a radon issue too.
Well, that's what we're looking into right now. I spoke to some people that have gotten some radon tests, and they're seeing 80 times the safe limit.
So now it's a public health issue.
Well, potentially. I don't want to say that. Right. I don't want to scare people. We have to do a lot of testing. We got to check a lot of things out, but it could potentially be.
And George, one more question. So now, what's the implications of this for the municipalities? So say all these people foreclose on their homes and taking all these homes off the grand list. Yeah. That's bad stuff.
Their property values sink because of the
Chris is looking for a way to blame this on Dan Malloy.
No, actually, this one I think they actually, the state did a fairly okay job. The problem is, it's what you don't know. And there are all sorts of liability issues
Well, there's
here.
a lot of work still to be done.
Can I ask a question? So for the houses...
Well, just answer mine first.
Okay.
And as I repeat the question real quick.
So what are the implications for the municipalities, for the grand list, and for economic development? And these towns can't take this kind of...
These are small towns.
You have a town like Coventry, and I think I read in the JI, the Hartford Current last week, they were saying that I think it's 25% of the homes were built in this time period. So, I mean, imagine what would happen if within 10 years, the home that I was in last night will be condemned. And there are potentially hundreds of homes in each one of these towns that could be condemned in 10 years. That means the houses are worth zero. You can't just auction these off. You're not going to auction a house off. You have to pay the bank would have to pay people to take it on to fix these homes. $200,000 fix, the homes aren't worth that much. So the idea is you're going to lose 20 to 25% of the tax base. These homeowners aren't going to be around for that. If there isn't a solution, if there isn't something to figure this out, the homeowner's going to walk away. You're now going to have entire neighborhoods of $500,000 houses.
Abandoned neighborhoods.
It's going to be just abandoned.
So can they fix it? Can workers go in and fix, right? You said you can't just fill cracks. So would they have to, like, just drop in a new foundation?
So the only way that we know that I'm comfortable on air telling people, because I've been in homes that were fixed, they built inner walls. The problem is the house keeps moving. The inner wall ends up cracking too. And so, and in the end, the inner wall that gets built, the house is even sitting on it because the other wall pushes it up.
So for the houses that you talked about that were built more recently, 2013, 2014, 2015, and you said in 10 to 15 years, is there anything that they can do now to prevent that from happening?
That's what, and you had mentioned the governor, you know, he did step up and acknowledge this, which was the first thing that needed to happen.
That makes me cry when you say that.
But no, at the same time, he doesn't want to deal with this issue either, as nobody necessarily would.
That makes Roy cry.
I'll be fair on both sides, equally busting. But I think that there's ways that, yes, one is a petrographic analysis test. They take a core sample, right? So you put in 4 walls a core sample. They then test to see what all the elements are. The problem is it costs $5,000 to do that, or up to it. So many people, if the home is now not worth what it's worth, they can't even borrow the $5,000 to test that.
So some of the seed money in the legislation will help for that?
Yes, and so that's where that would be. And I think, in the conversations I've had with people in insurance, and I think the insurance industry may hold their breath as I say this, you got to figure out the scope of this. You almost have to test every single house in those 40 towns that have had that were built after 1983. Why that date is when it starts, we don't know yet, but that's when it starts.
And so are you also hearing about different proposals that can stop this from happening in the future, whether there's certain legislation that should be passed?
The governor spoke up a week or two ago talking about setting up standards so we know what's in the aggregate, what's in the concrete. Part of the problem is that, and this is the other issue, it's not only if you have the issue. The bigger issue is for those who don't have it. There's no records in any of these towns that show who poured the concrete in 1989. So you may not have this problem, but if your neighbor 3 houses up has a problem and you maybe had the same builder, who's going to buy that house? There's a kid that I know, I grew up, played baseball with, my father was his coach, and bought a home, model home, beautiful home in Ellington, $450,000 home, built in 2010. He's selling his house to go to Charlotte. There's one vertical crack, and just so you know, every foundation cracks.
Right.
The difference here is the horizontal cracking. That's not supposed to happen. You see these downward cracks? That's going to happen in every foundation in the country. It's the horizontal cracking and the spider cracking that becomes a problem. So this kid's trying to sell his house. He gets 3 offers in 1 week. They see one crack and the people get nervous. Oh, is this the problem? They bring an engineer in. Well, it's built in 1983. It could be the issue. They get a petrographic analysis test. There's pyrrhotite in the concrete. This kid's house isn't going to crack until 2030. He's not going to be able to sell his house until they know whether it cracks or not. And so the other issue is that you have people, you know, what's that going to do to the real estate market to those who don't have the problem? You cannot prove it. My father has a real estate office in Suffield. They've sold real estate up in northern Connecticut every day since 1954. I was in it for 10 years. Never heard of this problem until 2015. Not one warning given from an appraiser, from an inspector, or from a town building official.
Building inspectors are the last people you want to talk to.
Any exposure? What kind of exposure does the company have? And
well,
what's going to happen with them?
Well, this is what's interesting, is now that the state did the test and confirmed what we reported about this pyrrhotite seeming to be the element that's in everything. If you test it now, there's a lawsuit from a home built in 2013 that has pyrrhotite in it, and they're going after the concrete company. It's a 10-year statute of limitation. So if the home doesn't start cracking for 15 years, the concrete company has been protected. There is no evidence that this concrete company would have any idea about this, maybe at the earliest 98 would have been the earliest they could have maybe known that there was a problem. That was the first reported issue, and that woman called everybody. You know, there were meetings in the state capitol in 2002. A state representative asked Attorney General Dick Blumenthal to investigate this issue in 2003.
And I'm sure he did.
And well,
he opened a file.
And he says, and he didn't, but what he says is that he was told the wrong information. Oh. In their defense, because it also was the Rowland and Rell administration as well.
Why would anyone tell Dick Blumenthal a lie?
Well, but I think that the issue is you only knew of 2 dozen of these then. Right. And the story was there was too much water.
Well, somehow I don't think.
We'll blame Dick Blumenthal.
somehow George Colli, chief investigator. What's your title going to be now?
I think lead investigative reporter, and Tom Dudchek's go around. I'm going to pick up your dry cleaning and get your coffee. I know my role around
many more times.
Put my house on the market tonight.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next week. Thanks, Tom.